Dave Ramsey was absolutely roasted for this clip by finance YouTubers across the board.
If you make 12 and you need to leave 4% in there for inflation raises, that leaves you 8. So I'm perfectly comfortable drawing 8.
What if he was onto something? I'm Joe Macek, cross-border investment advisor and portfolio manager with IA Private Wealth and IA Private Wealth USA. And today, I'm going to dive into what Dave Ramsey said, why he got roasted, and why I think as a retiree, you should probably listen to this particular Dave Ramsey video, but for a very different reason. Let's jump in. Okay, so let's be real. Dave Ramsey is a very dynamic financial talk show host that blends tough love with actionable advice. The show features Dave Ramsey's direct, no-nonsense approach to personal finance, focusing on practical steps for overcoming debt, building wealth, and achieving financial independence. And in November of 2023, a listener called in with their financial question, seeking guidance from Dave Ramsey about a safe withdrawal rate, which set off a firestorm of criticism for Dave Ramsey. Let's take a look.
I found on your website a little article that talks about 4 to 5% withdrawal rate, and I was trying to run the numbers around that, and I thought I was close. And then about a month ago, George Camel released a video that said that the withdrawal rate for a 30-year time horizon should be closer to 3%.
Okay, so you can clearly see Dave Ramsey here with an exceptionally confused look on his face. And then we see this.
So if I can establish financial independence comfortably, then I was wondering if I could ease up on baby step 4 to pay off the house faster.
Okay, I'm a little confused because I don't know what the hell George is doing a 3% withdrawal rate, because that's absolutely wrong. I'm going to have to find out where that video is and get it taken down, because that's just wrong. You don't need to have a 3% withdrawal rate. That's ridiculous. I hope you misunderstood. I hope we didn't put out trash like that.
Was it 4 to 5%?
No, it shouldn't be 4 to 5%. It ought to be more than that. I mean, if you're making 12 in good mutual funds and the S&P is average 11.8, and if inflation for the last 80 years is average 4%, if you make 12 and you need to leave 4% in there for inflation raises, that leaves you 8. So I'm perfectly comfortable drawing 8. But if you want to be a little bit conservative, 7, but sure not 5 or 3.
Okay, so Dave Ramsey essentially goes on to say that an 8% withdrawal rate on your money is safe when you consider getting a very easy 12% compound annual rate of return from mutual funds or the S&P 500 and a 4% inflation rate. He says you should easily be able to withdraw 8% per year, which many people came out on YouTube saying this was highly unlikely and probably would not work. And for the most part, I would tend to have to agree with most of the roasters out there. I do think that some of the longer term numbers that Dave Ramsey has said were quote unquote easily achievable are too high in this clip, and expecting an easy 12% return is just not very realistic. And I think in addition to this, there would be a pretty large failure rate if you had retirees withdraw 8% of their capital from their principal during retirement. It would probably not last forever or in perpetuity, as Dave Ramsey says.
$1 million should create for you an $80,000 income, boys and girls. So you should perpetually, like if forever, you should be able to pull $80,000 forever and never destroy it.
However, he does say something very interesting, and as a retiree, you should pay particular attention to this, as I think there is something to be said for this according to a study that I found in the US.
And I'm just irate right now that we have joined the stupidity.
Why is it that stupid, though?
It's too low. It's too low because it's not realistic. You do not need to live on 4% of your money for your nest egg to survive.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to dive into next. What really happens with your nest egg with a 4% withdrawal rate and the underlying fear that many retirees face, the fear of withdrawing their money. You see, you might not be ready for just how tough transitioning into retirement can be. The savings habits that you so critically developed that worked for you so well during your working years might suddenly work against you when you enter retirement. retirement. And for this reason, it's one of the most overlooked struggles retirees encounter, a challenge I've named the savings paradox. So what is the savings paradox? Well, the savings paradox, or permission to spend problem, is a psychological barrier that prevents even the most well-prepared retirees from enjoying the wealth that they've worked so hard to accumulate. After a lifetime of delaying gratification and diligently saving for retirement, you finally reach the moment you've been preparing for, but suddenly both you and a lot of times society finds countless reasons why you shouldn't or can't spend that hard-earned wealth. You can hear the fear of having enough in the listener's voice right here.
Well, I was trying to back check it because, the 3 to 5, I thought that was a big range. And a lot of the studies I found showed
there's a lot of studies that are stupid in this space.
And this issue is vividly illustrated in Michael Kitz's groundbreaking 2016 article, Why Most Retirees Will Never Draw Down Their Retirement Portfolio. And this article is derived from the eye-opening study it's based on, Spending in Retirement, Determining the Consumption Gap. Now, this is a study out of the US, but I have found several similarities in my practice north of the border. And the findings are striking. Affluent retirees in the US, defined as those with at least $333,000 in total wealth, including housing, are failing to spend even their annual income during retirement, with the situation getting worse as their wealth increases. More alarmingly, the study reveals that 2/3 of retirees using a 4% initial withdrawal rate over a 30-year retirement end up with more than double their original principal. Yes, you heard me right. According to the chart, if you start with a 4% withdrawal rate, you're likely to end up with more than double your original principal 30 years later, about 2/3 of the time. You're more likely to see your wealth multiply by 5 times than to finish with less than your principal amount. Here is another crazy stat that you need to see. Over 90% of my watch time is generated by viewers who are not subscribed. And what these great viewers like you may not know is that hitting the like button for the YouTube algorithm really helps out my channel. So if you like how I slipped this shameless self-promotional plug into the video, please consider liking and subscribing, as it really helps my videos reach many more viewers like you. Thanks again in advance for your support. Now, in rare cases where retirees do start spending down their savings, it typically doesn't happen until their late 80s. This is well beyond the average life expectancy for most Americans and many Canadians. And this is consistent, albeit for a different reason, with what Dave Ramsey says.
I'm not destroying the nest egg. I'm not even touching the nest egg. I'm growing the nest egg.
Another key point from the study is that when you limit your spending in your early retirement years, it does offer peace of mind when it comes to running out of money. However, the problem arises when retirees believe that they can make up for that reduced spending later on. In reality, it becomes even more challenging to spend your wealth in later years due to the limitations you might face as you age. As a result, most retirees never truly recover from that so-called deferral of spending. So when it comes to withdrawal rates and having tons of money left over when you pass away, it's not because you're easily making 12% per year, as Dave Ramsey says. It's more likely because you could be afraid to spend that nest egg. The article from Kitsis reveals a startling fact. Despite the tough times from 2000 to 2008, when stock market returns were mediocre and withdrawals should have been draining accounts, the average financial assets of median retirees still grew. To make this even clearer, Kitsis lays out 2 scenarios for us, which I'll show on the screen, and I will quote directly from his article. Scenario 1. Imagine yourself with $1 million portfolio planning for a 30-year retirement with an inflation rate of 3% and the portfolio earning 8% annually. Here's what happens. Let's say that you spend $61,000 in the first year, an initial withdrawal rate of 6.1%. Adjusting each year for inflation, you would still have more in your account at the end of the 30 years than you started with. The chart on the screen shows that despite spending down the account, it would grow for the first 10 years, and you wouldn't even touch the principal until the 17th year. This assumes a modest 3% inflation rate and long-term returns of 8%, which is the average over the past century. Now let's dive into the second scenario here, where we take an even more conservative and pessimistic view. The chart projects the balanced portfolio to grow at only 7% with an inflation rate at a higher 4%. If you start by spending $49,000 in the first year at an initial withdrawal rate of 4.9%. Even with this lower rate, the portfolio would peak in value in year 11 and wouldn't dip into the principal until year 18. This is critical because a 65-year-old retiree's life expectancy in the US is only into their mid-80s and only slightly higher in Canada. Using this conservative strategy, you might never materially touch your principal before passing away. So the real challenge in retirement is to find the right balance between spending enough of your money early on and helping ensure stability for the later years. And it's perfectly reasonable to aim for a lower spending amount in the early years to help secure more stability later on, or to leave a legacy for your heirs if that's what you want to do. However, the article does highlight some very interesting things. One key finding of the article is that if you have feelings of inadequate preparation, it can shift your focus from growing your assets to just preserving them. This fear can often lead you to having an overemphasis on saving rather than spending. What's more is that retirees frequently rely on their intuition or gut feelings rather than long-term financial planning when adjusting their consumption and investment strategies. This is the same fear the listener had while talking to Dave Ramsey. And this situational approach to post-retirement spending can make you more vulnerable to loss aversion. In simple terms, relying on your intuition or gut feelings often results in lower confidence and increased anxiety during retirement. When a fear of loss truly sets in, you might see spending your retirement portfolio as a risky move and view drawing down your savings as a loss rather than as a planned and necessary use of your money. If you become overwhelmed by fear of loss, you may cut back on spending as a way to protect yourself from perceived financial mistakes. I think that when it comes to talking about retirement income, the message needs to shift from just worrying about withdrawal rates to finding ways to maximize your enjoyment of your hard-earned money while managing the uncertainties that comes along with investing. This change could help you get the most out of your savings, as shown by the consumption gap study. The reality is most retirees are holding back and thus are not fully using their assets. It's not that retirees can't spend their money, it's that many are afraid to. And from my experience, many retirees aren't clear on what they can actually afford, so they never think about what they might enjoy if they spent more. They don't evaluate how much extra satisfaction they could gain from additional activities because they can't envision a scenario where they could actually fund them. Let me give you an example. Imagine you live in Vancouver and your kids and grandkids are in Toronto. Throughout your life, you've budgeted to visit them once a year because that's what you felt that you could afford. So when you retire, you naturally would assume that you can only make that trip once a year. But what if you discovered through solid financial planning that your retirement assets could actually support, say, 5 visits per year without impacting your retirement? You might consider visiting more often. But then again, 5 visits seems like a ton, and you might not. Ultimately, it's a personal choice, but wouldn't you rather know you have more options as opposed to less, and that those options won't jeopardize your retirement? That's why I generally suggest that it's best that you start planning for retirement at least 5 years before you want to retire. This is so that you have a chance to discover these additional options and might be able to take advantage of them. This way, you can understand the true potential of your savings and your spending habits. You'll be able to create a retirement strategy that lets you live your best life according to your unique goals. And if that means spending a lot now and draining your accounts, or spending very little now to leave a significant legacy for your kids or a cause that you care about, then go ahead and do it. My hope for you is that you make these choices with intention and not out of fear. Do you want to know if you lose your CPP or OAS if you move abroad? Or maybe you want to learn more about my latest upload? Well, I've got everything all queued up and ready for you. Click here for more amazing financial insights. I'll be waiting. We'll see you soon.